So I'm going to close off with just two last questions. So the first is one of the most interesting things that came from your book After Tiananmen was the scope of dialogue that was actually possible within the CCP. There was criticism of official government lines, whether it comes to sort of economic reforms or the level of securitization that should be seen in this South China Sea. One thing that has been noticeable in the current sort of Chinese administration has been the centralization of power. So you were in China at that time. Do you think there have been effects, and what kind of effects has that had on the hold that the party has over sort of the state? Because one of the things that you mentioned in your book was sort of the fear of how brittle the party might be. We did see protests after COVID, right, which were not sort of foreseen. And even though sort of they were stamped down on, the fact that they occurred itself showed some signs of what control might look like and how it might sort of dissipate. That is one question. And so the last question was for people who are interested in learning more about China. Obviously, they should read your 3 books and your many working papers and reports. But what else can people like me or anyone else who's interested in learning more about China, what should we be doing?
Yeah, well, the first question is very interesting, Shreyas, because ultimately, we must not believe in the myths that the Communist Party is spreading. We must understand the history of the Communist Party. In the century that it has existed, there has never been a leader so dominant that they have been able to completely dismiss all dissent or opposition, however strong it is. Mao Zedong, who was unquestionably perhaps the most dominant leader China ever had, continually faced challenges to his power. And the Cultural Revolution, which devastated China in the 60s, was largely because of the threat that he thought he faced from his compatriots and his colleagues. Deng himself, despite appointing 2 general secretaries of the party as his successors, had to sacrifice both of them. And it was only the third, and the third was not necessarily Deng's nominee. The point I'm making is, we should not therefore imagine that because Xi Jinping has centralized power, that he is unchallenged within the system. We are not able very often to see that there might be dissent, that may be opposition. That opposition may be underground for the time being, it may be fragmented, but I have no doubt that it is there. And the signs are clear. When you continue to conduct purges of the military as well as in various segments of the party, 10 years after you have seized power, when in fact the appointments that you have made both on the civilian and military side are yours, then these are tiny indications that your power is not unchallenged. Similarly, when you try to impose your own thought as the national thought in the way that Mao did, again, it is an indication that you fear that other strands of thinking may exist. So the point I'm making is that we need to be much more aware of what is happening inside China. And we need to understand that because President Xi Jinping has cracked down, that dissent may have gone underground, but it may not have entirely disappeared. And it might reappear suddenly at any point of time. And the one incident you mentioned is, I think, very revealing. The catastrophic collapse of COVID policy. Look, this is a state which has invested more in its internal security than its external security. It is a surveillance state. And yet the surveillance state could not judge the mood of its people in November 2022. That tells you something about the brittleness of this state. It also tells you that people can hide their views, their thinking and emotion. And that however much you centralize and crack down, you can never eliminate dissent. I think that's important. Secondly, I think what we need to do as citizens of India is read more informed opinion on China from Indians. And there are a large number of books now written by Indians on various aspects.
Yes.
There are, of course, other colleagues of mine like Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, the former National Security Advisor, Mr. Shyam Saran, the former Foreign Secretary, who have written on China, and those are outstanding books to read.
Yeah.
But a younger generation of scholars are coming up in India who are writing on a range of subjects, from urbanization and demographics in China and its impact on the economy, to the future of Tibet when the 14th Dalai Lama is no more.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I think these writings are very relevant because these are writings which are contemporary and from a younger generation which is looking at it from a 40-year perspective, as compared to somebody like me who quite honestly doesn't have a 40-year perspective, right? Because we are not looking 40 years ahead.
Yeah.
So I think there's a great amount of writing. My worry is there's very little reading. And that is the tragedy, because we just do not feel this country is important enough for us to know about. And we need as a people collective to learn more and to know more. And I hope that your podcast and similar podcasts start that process in the younger generation, because ultimately all of you have to see a rising India coexisting with a rising China all the way up to 2070 or 2080. And if you don't get that right, if the younger generation in India doesn't get that right, then we will always play second fiddle.